we're up to the next passage I wanted to focus on is the very small passage of chapter 10, verse 35 and 36. But this is the passage which I think probably most people in Torah is one of the top 5 passages verses people know from the Torah. This is a passage that's preceded by the nun hafuchim, by the backwards nuns. And there's a whole question, how do you draw this backwards nun? It's also something that's a scribal oddity that appears in the Torah. So let me first read these verses, chapter 10, verse 35 and 36. And we'll read the Rashis, then we'll read some of the explanations on it from Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz and Mendel Zaks, a student of Chafetz Chaim, and Faras Yonasan, Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. And we'll see what, and then we have the Divrei Avram, and after that we'll see where we are. So let me first read the verses that it says, Vayihi ben Aaron, that when the ark would travel, Vayomer Moshe would say, Kuma Hashem arise, v'yafutu oivecha, v'yanusu misanecha mipanecha. When the ark would travel, Moshe would say, arise, and scatter your enemies, and let your enemies run away from before you. Uvenu chol yomar, when the ark would rest, Moshe would say, Shuva Hashem revavos alfei Yisrael. Shuva Hashem really, normally the word Shuva means return, but here Rashi will say it means rest Hashem amongst the revavos alfei Yisrael, amongst the myriads and thousands of Israel. Revos usually means 10,000. So, but we don't know exactly what it means. And this is the Rashi. So there's strange, and this is the Torah. It's a strange portion because it's introduced by a backwards nun, and it's concluded by a backwards nun. So let's see what Rashi says here. Rashi says, "Also lo simonios milfanav u'me'achrav." The Torah made signs for this passage before it and after it. So that's why when we write the Torah, we have to put a backwards nun before it and after it. Why? Well, Mar, to say she'ein ze mikomo, that this passage should not have appeared here. Also, Rashi says the Pesach Sheni passage should not have appeared there. But the Pesach Sheni passage was supposed to appear in the beginning of the book of Numbers, not where it appears here. And also, this should not have appeared. It should have appeared according to Gemara in Shabbos 116a. It should have appeared in chapter 2, which speaks about the layout of the camp. So, why is it written here? The Torah wants to divide up the passages which are talking about negative things which the Jewish people did. Meaning to say, it says in verse 33 that they journeyed away from Sinai. It says, Vayisume har Hashem, that they journeyed from Sinai, which seems innocuous enough, but the rabbis understand that this was a bad thing, because how did they leave? They left like students leaving a school, like students leaving class. So therefore, the Torah doesn't want to go straight from that passage into the passage of the mitonanim, the people are complaining, and also the passage of the Slavs. So the Torah interrupts it with this passage of the ark in order to interrupt the Peranios, the passages that are negative. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, and the pasuk says that Moshe says to the ark, "Arise, Hashem, Kuma Hashem." The ark would go before them 3 days' journey. Moshe would say, Amod, Hamtein Lanu, Al Tisrachek Yoter. Don't go farther away. And Moshe would ask the ark to wait. Arise and let your enemies be scattered. Hamakunasin. These are those who are gathered together to do battle. The Anusu Misanecha Ela Rofim. These are those who pursue. Meaning to say, Moshe says it's davening that one group should be scattered and one group should flee. So, Misanecha, those who hate you, Elu Sonei Israel. This refers to those who hate the Jewish people. For whoever hates Israel is really hating God. Is really hating God. And then just say, Shuva Hashem, rest Hashem when it returns. When the ark rests, he says, rest peacefully. Magid she'ein hashchina shora b'Yisrael petuchem mishnei alafim l'shtei revos. There needs 22,000 people to gather together in order for the divine presence to rest. But the point of this passage is, to my mind, that the ark was taken into battle. The ark was taken into battle. To this day, the Israeli army brings the Torah scrolls with them when they go into battle. You see Torah scrolls there. And that's based upon these verses which talk about the ark going into battle. There was of course a tragic time where in the time of Eli in the book of Shmuel, at the beginning of the book of Shmuel, the ark was brought into battle, and there the ark was captured by the Plishtim. So that was obviously not ideal. But this is the passage, a source for the idea of the ark going into battle. I wonder if all those congregations that are anti-war recognize the significance of this verse when they open the ark. I don't think anybody has changed this prayer. I know that there are a lot of prayers that have been changed by liberal denominations of Judaism, but I don't think Vayibin Aaron has been changed. It's pretty standard text, but it's really a text calling for the ark to lead us into battle to scatter our enemies. Okay, so now I want to share some of the commentary on this. I said that there are 3 commentaries I wanted to look at. The first is Faris Yonason of Rabbi Yonason Ivashitz. He talks about the scribal oddity of the backwards nuns. He says, Vayibin Aaron. Remember, I said that the passage is introduced and concluded by a backwards nun, and the Gemara in Shabbos learns from here that this before we get to Rabbi Yonason Ivashitz, that this is actually its own independent book of the Bible. It splits up the 2 sides of the 2 books of Bamidbar. It splits up the whole book of Bamidbar into 2 books, and it's its own book. And really, the first part of Bamidbar is not the same theme as the second part of Bamidbar. And so therefore, there's really 3 books here in the book of Bamidbar, and therefore there's really 7 books of the Bible, not 5 books. So I'm sure I've talked about this before. So the 7 books of the Torah, not the 5 books of the Torah. And this passage has 82 letters in it, which is the source for the idea that if there's a scroll with 82 letters or 82 words, I think it's 82 letters, that you're allowed to rush into the fire, save it from a fire on Shabbos. So let's see what Rabbi Yonason Ivashitz says. Asulo simanios. The Torah made signs before this passage. The nun hafucha, the backwards nun. By the way, there's a lot of debate as to how to draw the backwards nun. A lot of debate, and we're not going to solve this now, but it's not a certainty that, when they were printing it up originally, the printed text, they didn't want to make a whole new letter for this one thing, so they just took the nun and put it backwards. But that's not necessarily the case. That's what a backwards nun means. So anyway, they put the nun before it and afterwards in order to break between the 2 passages of punishment. So Rabbi Yonason Ivashitz asks, why was specifically the letter nun chosen? You ever wonder about that? Why specifically was the letter Nun chosen? So it's possible because Chazal said there's another place where the letter Nun was a special letter. That's in the passage, the Psalm of Ashrei, where the prayer of Ashrei, where King David wrote an acrostic poem, and he leaves out the letter Nun in his poem. He has one letter, one verse for each letter, except for the letter Nun. And why did he leave out the letter Nun? Because, says the Gemara in Brachos 4b, because all he could see when he was trying to compose this psalm was that the letter Nun stood for nofel, to fall. And citing the verse from Amos, that once he falls, he won't be able to get up. So therefore, the Nun hints to failure. The Nun hints to perennios. The Nun hints to this idea of failing. So that's why the letter Nun is placed here. But even during this time of distress, this time where God has hidden his face, nevertheless, Hashem turns to us from time to time to give us lifting up and salvation. And as the Midrash states, that my beloved is similar to a gazelle. Just like a gazelle, when it runs, it turns its face frontwards and then it turns its face backwards. So to God, even when God runs away from us, he's always turning his head towards us. And that's the idea of the backwards Nun. That even during the time of the Shekhinah moving away, so to speak, God still turns his face towards us. Therefore, even in the most difficult times, we witness just great moments and miraculous moments. I see there's a question. Let me just summarize what the Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz is saying, the beautiful idea that he's saying such a beautiful idea. First of all, why is the letter Nun the one that's chosen to be backward? And he says because the Nun symbolizes punishments, and therefore there was all these punishments and bad stories that were happening around this point in the book of Bamidbar. So why is it backwards? Because it's teaching us this idea that even in our times where God is hiding his face from us and we're being punished and it's a bad thing, nevertheless, God is still looking towards us and showing us some compassion and some mercy. So let me pause here. Continuing along, we want to say what Rav Mendel Zaks says about this passage. Vayhi ben Soharon, he says that the Gemara in Shabbos says it's its own passage in and of itself. Why? What's so special about this passage? Vayhi ben Soharon vayomer Moshe. When we went to dedicate a Torah in Catania, before we dedicated it, the chief rabbi of Venice was there, and he had a very specific tradition in Italy that they have a specific song that they sing these verses before they bring the Torah and they dedicate a synagogue. So what's so special about this passage? So Rabbi Zak says that this passage of Vayhi ben Sov and Uvenucha Yomar, these passages include all of our history. What does that mean? Vayhi ben Soa, when we're running away, when there is a time of scattering, of exile, where the enemy presents a danger on all of us, then at that moment, Moshe gets up and prays, "Arise, Hashem, and scatter your enemies," meaning to say, Vayhi ben Soa, when we're running away, Moshe stands up and prays, "Hashem, please scatter the enemies." Uvenucha, and when it's a time of tranquility, then there's a danger of the opposite danger, the danger of people forgetting the Torah. People have less faith because it's a time of tranquility. Then Moshe says, "Shuva Hashem revevos al Yisrael." return all those tens of thousands of Jewish people who are assimilating, because it's a time of tranquility. Shuva, from return God, meaning to say, God, bring them back, meaning to say, when it's a time of exile, then we need Hashem to fight for us against our enemies. And when it's a time of tranquility, then we need Hashem to bring back those who are assimilating. And at that moment, Moshe said, Yehi ratzon sheyashivu es shvuscha, v'gam milashon tshuva, v'shavta et Hashem alkecha. May it be your will, Hashem, that you return those who have left, who went astray. So that's the beautiful interpretation of Rav Zaks, who, by the way, was the father of Rabbi Kranz, the Silver Spring Jewish Center. Okay, next explanation of the Divrei Avram. Vayi ben Soharon. Vayi ben Soharon, if you take the last letters of Vayihi, the last letter of Ben Sohar, the last spell of the word Aaron, you spell out Ayin Nun Yud, which is poor. And this teaches us that we have to give honor to the poor person. Generally speaking, poor person is somebody who is nav and nad. He travels from place to place, like by even Aaron, when the ark is traveling, but it hints to when the poor man is traveling from place to place. And so therefore we have to accept him with a miraculous the Sefer Panim Yafos. We have to accept him with a beautiful expression of joy. Just like we're supposed to greet a poor person, just like we greet the ark. When the ark is opened, everybody rises to attention. When the Torah scroll is carried around, everybody gives the Torah scroll our greatest honor. That's the way we're supposed to treat a poor person, right? Even Soharon. And there is indeed a connection between the ark and the poor person. Just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just like Hashem dwells between the two poles of the ark, as it states, I'll make myself known to you in the small crack between the fingertips of the Kruvim. That's where God will rest. So too, Hashem Yisbarach, God stands next to the right of the poor person. As it states, Ki Amod Liyamin Evyon. God will stand to the right of the poor. And so therefore, we have an obligation to bring him close, to support him and to uplift him in whatever way is possible. That's the idea of Vayihi ben Soharon. We learned a little bit of that in our Daf Yomi yesterday and today. One thing we learned is, first of all, that if you don't pay a poor man, or any person, but especially if you don't pay a poor man on time, right when you're supposed to be paying him, then you're in violation of 5 prohibitions and 1 positive commandment from the Torah. Somebody does work for you, you have to pay them right away. Not only that, let's say you lend a person money, and then the court says that this person has to pay it back. The person has some time to pay it back, but in the meantime, if you want to take a security for the fact that he owes you the money, let's say he has to sell off his assets to pay you, you're not allowed to, it's a biblical prohibition, to go into his house and seize the property. You're not allowed to do that. A court, according to the position of Shmuel in the Gemara, even the court is not allowed to go in and seize the property as a security. But rather, they have to wait outside to bring it outside and then seize it. This is to protect the dignity of the poor. He's allowed to have his dignity. Not only that, there are certain things that are off limits for collection. If it's a garment that he wears to sleep in, or if it's a tool that he uses to eat, these are items that are off limits for seizure. You can't seize it from that. So these are some of the halachos that the Torah emphasizes about the poor. Okay, I would like to stop here now and take any questions that people have. People have questions, happy to address.